Hi, apologies for the delay. The release team meeting ran over a little bit, actually talking about kind. So, what do you know? And I've been kicked out of all my tabs. I imagine Lubomir should be in the same boat. He was also discussing this stuff. There was some concern about turning down Kubernetes Anywhere CI due to cloud provider, but
I was wondering with that, aren't a lot of the cloud provider extensions being moved to be kind of more, not like CRD-like, but out of tree and pluggable on anything else?
it is, but it's not really there yet. And pretty much all of our CI is using in-tree stuff. And in fact, the vast majority of it is GCE. So that was the main counter argument, is that, well, testing Kubernetes with GC is not particularly exciting, given that most of our CI tests GCE.
Hello.
Oh, look.
That wonderful discussion that maybe it can spill over into here, but I got to see
it just did a little bit, except Neil, it's not here yet.
Okay. I'll see if I can get dim zone in here.
So context is sig-cluster lifecycle is setting up more jobs with kind, and there's some discussion about possibly release blocking and possibly not Kubernetes Anywhere being release blocking, and there's some concerns there. And the SIG release meeting, or release team meeting, which is just before this meeting.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm celebrating the fact that it is nice and sunny in Seattle today. We were supposed to get snow, and somehow it transformed into just continuous sunlight. It's great. I will take sun any day of the winter out here. Yeah, I honestly, I was kind of looking for an up-down vote. I wasn't even going to get into the mechanics of it because in terms of precedent, I don't just immediately want to drop something and then add something else.
Yeah.
Okay, we got a DIMS. Let's see if we can get a Lubomir. Did you ping him?
I
guess I could put this on your agenda too, instead of just blowing scope.
Popular term around here.
Kind of cloud providers, huh? That'll be fun.
Yeah, I mean, so we're actually even looking at increasingly to do various traffic serving type tests. We're probably going to need to implement a load balancer. We already kind of have one for multi-master. Yeah, it's going to get interesting.
Pretty soon.
Yeah. I'm not super worried about that, though. I think that a lot of things that are really interesting in the cloud provider path are storage in particular. And so we can do some more to fake that out, but having talked to some of the storage people, I don't think we can fully do that, because there's paths where you hand off having things disks mounted and things. And I really think we should still use cloud VMs or bare metal clusters for that sort of thing. And be testing providers. I'd like to see more of that in informing, running CI against Kubernetes with various deployers and providers and things. But we're not really there. In the meantime, though, I think we're basically just testing GCE again for the billionth time in the Kubernetes Anywhere job. So I'm not super concerned about that.
Right. As long as there is coverage, I'm happy to leave that.
Technically, Kubernetes Anywhere, I think, had some limited support for other platforms, but we weren't running that. And all of the patches that I've seen going in to keep the CI running have just gone to the GCU one because that's what we're actually running. At this point, almost all the activity is basically just Lubomir trying to keep the CI on its last legs.
Right. That's why I was saying we shouldn't turn it down right now. If it happens to fail and keels over, then we don't resurrect it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm pretty on board with that. I was not expecting this quite yet. I think we're like good enough to be using it for Signal. I don't know that we should necessarily drop Kubernetes Anywhere yet. That said, we can't force anyone to maintain it, and it is pretty unmaintained. It's basically just Lubomir.
It's that thing that so I agree with that. My plan is not to immediately flip a switch and suddenly change things, but to actually, because I don't want to use this as precedent for, hey, can we add or drop a job just because we want to? Right. Okay, thanks. So there should be some level of hysteresis involved. I could imagine maybe a reasonable compromise is to add both of the jobs, is to move the existing Kubedium job over to release informing, which isn't a hard block for us, but just a thing we are supposed to be aware of, and to put kind in that same place, and to ask or require some amount of data that shows that over time we're getting good, reliable signal. We document that we know what coverage we're giving up and what coverage we're getting. We're clear on who's supporting it, and then we move forward.
And in fact, on that note, I actually know there is some non-zero amount of flake. Some of that is super rarely we have like a C-groups issue coming up. The rest of it is, I think some of the tests, the conformance tests when they're run in parallel become ever so slightly flakier.
Yeah.
So like, I'm going to expect this to not be 100% green signal. It's going to be one of the greener signals we have, hopefully, but we should really like record that and see it first.
Right.
Do we have a bar for that set yet? Like how long it's supposed to be?
No, I don't think so. I need to go take a look. So That's why I agree with the rationale totally. So I just don't want to like do a thing that's super quick and then have that used as precedent to change all the things super quickly. That's not going to happen.
Also, there will come a time when it's going to keel over, especially when the upgrade kicks in. I think it'll start failing at that time. So at that time, we stop. We can move it out from the blocking dashboard to informing, or even yank it out. So that's what I would say we should do. If it's on, if it's still green, leave it alone for now, and until it turns red all over the place.
Okay. That sounds good to me. I would like to confirm this with Lubomir as well, but looks like he's actually in now.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was late.
Hey, Lubomir, just to catch you up. So what I was suggesting in the previous call was that it's running right now, and it seems to be doing its thing right this minute. So until it starts turning red, leave it alone. And when it starts turning red, then we do not try to do what we did before, which is to try to fix it. We'll just move it out at that point.
So it's currently red. That's part of the problem.
Is that okay? Then I guess decision is made. I assumed it was still running.
Sorry, I missed that context. It's not completely red, I think, but there's like a portion of it that's gone red.
Yeah, master is broken because of a daemon set job test. So I sent a fix during the weekend. The problem is that Kubernetes Anywhere breaks every week at this point. And I have to say that testing for is part of the problem as well, because the integration with the end-to-end testing framework and the deployer, and it's super entangled. I mean, if you have the argument that we are testing GCE infrastructure with Kubernetes Anywhere like a backup signal, I understand this argument, but Kubernetes anywhere, I don't think that's the solution for this. It's just super unstable.
Understood. Yeah, at
I
this
will
point, I
add
give
a-
up.
I will add a note. I'm pretty actively working on trying to disentangle those and hoping to start piloting that with some of the kind jobs maybe later this week. We're doing a full-on rewrite of kubetest and the image that goes with it. That has also gotten to the point where it's difficult to maintain.
I mean,
There is also a separate problem that we need to discuss. Sorry, there's a separate problem we need to discuss by another channel where you need to pass in the number of worker nodes to the tests right now. And because we have things like ginkgo e2e.sh, we don't really notice that in CI. But this is going to become a problem for standing up other CI because there's this init flag that instead of being detected from the cluster, you need to invoke the tests in a certain way or they fail. That is a problem.
I had a question here. So, because I don't understand all the GCP related jobs, are we using something else apart from KubeUp to bring GCP clusters?
It's all a big fat pile of bash that is equally as riskily supported. So there are no winners in this situation. I think my key concern here is, like, I totally agree with your rationale and motivation. I just don't want to immediately flip a switch and use that as precedent to flip a switch for everybody. What I think I would rather do is move this job off into release informing and take a look at what kind of precedent we want to set for history that proves viable signal for kind. My other question is, what should we do about the kubeadm jobs that use Kubernetes Anywhere across all of our release branches? Because, for example, if I look at the release 113 blocking dashboard, the kubeadm jobs there seem green.
Yes, I think we should follow the same pattern for the other branches as well.
Okay.
I mean, for consistency, the fact that master is broken currently is because the KK master is broken. But if we make a change in test infra, this might also break the other branches that are tested using the deployer, because test infra is independent from KK.
Okay.
And I've seen this happen many times. You
Right.
have to fix test infra to fix the deployer.
No, I like, again, I think, I consider you a kubeadm maintainer. I hear from the kubeadm subproject that they don't want this to be their supported way of saying that kubeadm is exercised continuously in CI. You'd rather have something else. So I get that. If the Kubernetes Anywhere folks feel like they would like their stuff to be continuously exercised in CI, I welcome them to come and talk to us and propose a way of keeping it maintained.
And there's no one there. It's just Lubomir. So.
Yeah.
I feel like there are more people than Lubomir who work on Kubernetes Anywhere, though, right?
Nope.
Okay.
Not anymore.
They're all gone. Lubomir has been leading the charge for probably 3 releases now, and there's nobody else helping him.
Okay. That sounds good to me then. And yes, cluster API backed jobs can't come fast enough.
Understood.
Yeah, it's me, Fabrizio, pretty much who are maintainers at this point. And I mean, everybody is saying that we should remove this. If you want to keep it, we should definitely move it outside of the blocking dashboard again, because I don't want the release to be blocked by this.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll write up a plan in that issue. Thank you for opening it where you did, how you did, and I'm done hijacking this meeting. Thank you.
Thanks.
And apologies to anyone else who wasn't in on that. We've been spinning up more CI using kind, and this discussion kind of spilled over from the release team meeting. Okay, so we have the V1 Alpha 3 proposal. I'm not actually sure how much we need to talk about it here, given the amount of back and forth we've had on the issue, but if anyone hasn't seen it yet, that would be great to look at and comment, and if anyone has any further things to say about it, that would be welcome. Or sorry, that's the wrong link. It is in the doc as well, though. Well, basically what I'm hoping to do here is get some of the breaking changes out of the way and clarify some things. Like our top level configuration object is config.config right now. Calling it cluster is a little bit clearer. Fabrizio already mentioned this previously in another issue, which I missed. I don't think that one has any concerns, but there are a number of other things. So what I'd like to suggest is that we move forward with the ones that haven't been controversial to start and follow up on the rest of them shortly. Just so that we can move forward with making it easier to add, like, say, some of these cluster-wide network fields or removing load balancer.
So about the replicas there, should we really remove the replicas? Is it a problem?
So we can't keep it. My concern is that basically replicas becomes near useless once you set anything more than the role, or maybe image, which is at most 2 lines of config for each node. The other things like the host mount paths or possibly ports or things like that are going to need to actually be per node. We're going to wind up having to support some kind of like node templating solution or something like that to make that viable. I'd rather not own that when that kind of thing can be done to, produce a kind config.
Also, the images are part of.
Right. So you can set image of the cluster wide. You can also set it on the node. It would make sense to have replicas of a role plus an image, but that's 2 lines per node, which doesn't really seem worthwhile to have the replicas field because, for example, if you have 2 nodes, it will only be 1 less lines of config then. And I don't think this is a particularly difficult issue to manage versus once you set any of the other fields, you're going to get into pretty weird scenarios where you're using like the same directory for all of them or something that's not a great idea. And we'll wind up needing to add something like, oh, you can template the paths, or I'd rather instead that we take some other tool and produce multiple templated node entries and just consume that from kind.
Yeah, something big that has to be duplicated is the per node kubeadm config, and your argument was that we shouldn't do it.
I don't think we have I still haven't seen a reason to do that yet. I'm sure we'll find one eventually, but I also think it's going to be the kind of thing where you're doing some pretty advanced testing and you can either put up with it, or you can have some tool read in the kind types and generate a config file.
The kubeadmin config applies only to the to the bootstrap node, so it is not necessary. It is not necessary.
Currently, that's true. I think it might become a problem later if we're doing like multi Kubernetes version join or something, which is probably going to happen. But again, I think like the test runner or something can produce a config file if we get into that situation.
Yeah, this is useful for version skew scenarios, definitely.
But we also don't really support that yet.
The question is, should we support it in the long term now?
Version skew, definitely, but I think replicas is something that we should revisit if we have stronger evidence that we need it. I don't think we actually need it. I think we can simplify some things, and we can avoid expecting the kind of templating and things.
Yeah, I'm in general okay with not having the replicas. It's just a convenience, in my opinion.
Well, so for the most convenient thing where you weren't setting these anyhow, we probably should follow up on Fabrizio's PR where you have flags to set the number of nodes and you just get default nodes and don't set any of the fields. And just go ahead and bifurcate those scenarios where either you're just making it in default nodes of a type or you're actually configuring nodes. And if you're actually configuring nodes, you can, add an entry for each node.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense because in kind we will never have too many nodes because it is limited to one machine.
You say that. I'm sure someone soon is just going to get a really big CI machine and run 1,000 node cluster or something.
Oh, okay. So my argument.
I do know we've gone the other route, and for testing some data where we wanted to like normalize the coverage output with conformance, we've run 6 clusters at once. Those were 1 node each though, but like it, I think that one will happen eventually too. But I think that's the very advanced user. We could say, write a little script that produces your giant config.
I think I was able to create 7 nodes on my machine at some point. I should try maxing to see how many I can.
I think it's going to be fairly RAM bounded. Okay, what else was available there? I think that was the most contingent one. The other one was port naming, which I've agreed to just punt. So I was trying to get a like Nginx ingress working on this, and you could kind of do it with one. It's not very flexible. I think we probably should just go ahead and come up with a better solution than that. I'm willing to just totally drop that from this and come back to it. The ports on nodes, which would also mean we can drop anything about node labeling or naming and come back to those later as well.
So we are replacing a host port with an ingress.
So it was going to let you do something like you add some specific ports to a node, and those get actually set on the node container, and then you run something on host ports with hostnet in the pod, and then you can route traffic through that, and that kind of works, and maybe we should have an option for that, but it won't really work super well once you try to do multiple nodes, because now you have to make sure you schedule that host port thing onto the right node, which we can solve, but we have to add more complexity there. And then, I mean, this also just doesn't really scale to multiple clusters or mini ports, but I would like to visit it soon, because I think we can unblock some people by saying, okay, you should deploy ingress Nginx to like, the control plane node or something and run a host port thing there. And then you can set in your kind config that you need these host ports opened up on the node. And you can't do it with multiple clusters, and you have to be careful about like actually scheduling to the node that has those ports, but you can serve traffic. That's blocked a number of use cases. What would be much better is if we come up with something that like implements load balancer and opens tunnels and that sort of thing, but that's going to get a bit more complicated to do well.
And what about using the load balancer?
So pretty similar. So the main thing with using the load balancer solution we have now is the same thing, where you have to have created a container with all the ports you want. So like if you like, deploy something and you're like, I want another port, then we need to like rerun the container or something like that. Or you need to have specified all these up front, and we need to have like already load balanced. And that's kind of weird for Kubernetes to have like, besides the control plane thing, which is outside of Kubernetes concern, it's kind of weird to say that like you have to deploy your load balancer before your cluster is even up.
But actually you need the load balancer before your cluster.
Oh, right. I mean, but the Kubernetes concept of a load balancer.
Okay.
Right, for mapping traffic into your cluster. That sort of thing doesn't...
No, I was thinking that since it is a networking problem and we already have a load balancer, that to use this component to tunnel traffic in and out.
Right, so you can also do this by deploying a SOCAT container yourself. The real tricky thing is how do you like open and close more or less ports or that sort of thing. So an option that might make sense there that's similar to some other ones is something along the lines of there's a little agent you run, and it like opens a port with some tunnel in. And so then instead of a load balancer, we just run a tunneling agent. Like maybe it's just an SSH container. And from the host, we can open tunnels into the container network. The other reason that that kind of thing would be nice is we can do bidirectional, so that you can talk. Because another thing that we haven't solved yet is I have a workload in my cluster and I want to talk to an external service, and I'm going to mock that out too. So I'm going to run that on my local machine. You can't talk back to localhost because you're talking to the container's localhost. But I think we can punt all this to a later consideration. I would be kind of interested in trying to add like host ports now, but I don't know that it's strictly necessary because we probably are going to have to write something more advanced anyhow.
Kind proxy.
Yeah, I'm thinking just some kind of like, because I mean we have the we have a cluster on a private network, and you want to talk back and forth from the private network to like your everything else. So I think we're probably going to wind up with something like SSH tunnels.
Yeah, kind port forward or kind proxy, it is the same. So kind of act as a tunnel to the cluster.
I'm actually kind of surprised that James hasn't needed this yet for like cert manager. I guess they're able to do everything with like in cluster traffic, and I think they've done some other funky network stuff to fake that out. So another interesting PR that we got over the weekend that could use some discussion, we got a PR to add Vi and less to the node image for debugging. And
what is the size of Vi? I'm just asking.
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I imagine it's pretty small, and if not, we could say, oh, it needs to be nano or something tiny. Probably the more. Yeah, we already like. Well, the reason I want to discuss this is not that that PR concerns me. It's that okay, Aaron over here actually loves Emacs maybe, and we're gonna add Emacs to the image, and we're gonna add man in the middle proxy, and like where does it stop? Right now, where things stop is what do we need to boot Kubernetes? What do we need to do our HA clusters, and that's it. If we want to expand that boundary, which is probably reasonable for debugging, I think we need a new boundary, and I'm not. I don't know that we need it that badly for this PR. I'm just imagining this PR setting the precedence for the next PR, where it's Emacs or whatever.
So I'm +1 on adding less as a command, but not adding a text editor because, like I explained to Ed Bartosz, who is the author of the PR, I'm a nano user. Somebody is a Vi user. Somebody is Emacs user, and also you can already install whatever you want on the node.
Right. Well, but so by that reason, why would we add less? Because you can't pipe the output to the host and run less on your host too.
That's true. That's true. So I'm just a +1 because it's a tiny binary. But other than that, you can do a lot of things from the host already. And also you can install on the node.
That's true. Right. But so another option that we didn't fully explore yet is having an alternate image that includes these things. My concern with that is that so far we've been pretty good on like when you run things in CI or when you run them locally, they're the same. Even to the point of things that we need to do for Mac and Windows, we go ahead and do on Linux, like using localhost instead of the container IP.
Personally, I'm not fans of adding developer tools into the image because everyone can do a simple Docker file and add whatever they want. Instead, I think that we need to that something that is missing to kind is the possibility to build some node image variants. For instance, for adding a pre-pulled image.
So that is
now we have Docker. We have load that, if I'm right, loads an image to running containers. But if I want to add a pre-pulled image to the node image, so I can get it already in every node. This is something really useful.
So for today, that's actually possible, just not documented, and I'm not sure if we want to, or maybe we want to make a separate directory for this or something. But there is just a directory that contains these things. You don't even actually need to build an image. You can use the mount paths thing to add you can mount through a directory with these tarballs. So actually my suggestion there is for that particular thing, we should document a path that you mount to, so that you don't actually even have to build. But for the more general, I want to build custom things. The node image supports technically any base image you supply. So you could take an existing base image, do a from, add some stuff, and maybe that's a response to this PR as well.
Yes. Okay.
But maybe even we should accept a like semi-standard one in like a contrib folder or something that's like, here's a debug base image that you can build.
I was thinking about like the base image. Currently, we use we basically what was the name of this tool? We take the base image and we place it inside a constant in the source code.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, can we add an intermediate image between the base image and the node image that can be used by people to?
Yes, and when you build the base image, there is a flag to tell it to use a source directory instead.
Yes, you can also do that. Yeah. So you can modify.
Yeah, so you can make a modified copy, or we can actually just point you to like, here's a contrib directory that takes an existing base image as an argument with a default and adds a bunch of like tools and things to it. You can build with that, and then you can tell your node images to build with that with your new base image.
I think this should be the documented way of adding new tools. Yes.
Okay, let's go forward with that then and move on to upgrade testing. Oh, no, it looks like you have something else before that about systemd as a C group driver.
Yes, so last night I spent slightly more than desired time on trying to get the systemd C group driver to work inside the node container. And it is super tricky because I started getting errors about C group root paths not working, and something about quality of service in the kubelet. And I started Googling about this, and I found some threads from 2016. And to my understanding, it's kind of tricky to get this working. I'm sure you saw the recommendation written by somebody at VMware that we should like default to systemd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also have some concerns about this. We're not fully following systemd's recommendations about putting systemd in a container because we need to do Docker in a container as well. I have some, thanks Aaron. I have some concerns about making sure that this inner systemd doesn't interact with the outer systemd. If we're using the C groups driver, so like Docker itself tries to handle this for Docker and Docker to some extent. I would want us to do a fair bit of, we'll need to do some testing, particularly in the CI environment, to make sure we don't have any bad interactions there. In general, when we do the increasing nesting, that is the hairy part because it's not really nested with V1.
Yeah, because if you have a Kubernetes cluster on your host, and you also create a kind cluster, in both cases, if you are using cgroup FS as the manager, you're basically creating a couple of managers on the host and a couple of managers for each node in the kind cluster. So It's super entangled.
Right, and then we add to that, most people that are running in Kubernetes, including ourselves, are also running a Docker in between.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is, like, I think this is possible. We should be very careful about changing anything with C groups.
Yes, I can experiment more on this, but I was kind of stuck after 4 hours or something like that, trying to get it to work. I mean, maybe I can revisit this, but since kind currently works, maybe we can just put this in priority backlog. But to my understanding, the problem here is that it might create like unpredictable failures.
Well, so we have some today that we're still a couple of users' environments are seeing something along this lines, and I haven't been able to reproduce that yet. But yeah, yeah.
From the user meter, yeah.
Yes. Also, I'm forgetting it. Darren Worrell, I think, at Shopify, was hopped on recently and has been doing some debugging, and they seem to have found what appears to be the host system D killing at like etcd on one of the nodes.
Oh, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, so we're gonna need to do some more debugging there. Big topic. I'd look, since I think this is gonna take a while. I want to move on to this, the upgrade testing. Do you want to give a little bit of background on that?
Fabrizio, did you see my post? What do you think? Like, how should we proceed for this cycle?
I think that for this cycle, it is really difficult to get a reliable CI signal on upgrades. And unless we do something very, very aggressive on the kind side. So let's start back. In my opinion, the target tool for CI is kind, because it is awesome for this, and making kind support upgrades is not difficult. Today I developed a prototype, just bringing in the binary for the target release. Then you already have what you need in the action. So it is not difficult to implement the upgrade workflow, even in multi-master. The tricky part is how you bring in the target version. But if we bring in binaries, I guess that it is not so difficult. So in my opinion, if we want to push along this way, we have to stick on kind. And the kubetest thing is already changing. I don't want to, I don't want to complicate too much this part. And kinder, I will think that we can focus kinder on the developer experience.
So I have a question. So I understand that we can implement upgrades, and I think it might, like you said, it may not even be that bad, and we can probably put it in kind. But probably the trickier part of this for CI is that we need to test in such a way that we go, okay, we create a cluster, we run tests, we start upgrading, maybe we run tests while we're upgrading, we test after upgrading, that sort of thing. Is that where you're expecting kinder to come in? Or because if that's the case, then it might actually just be cube test 2.
Okay, this is another topic. So who manages the workflow of the test? This is your question. I think that for now we can do what we can do is install Kubernetes, upgrade, and run end-to-end test. And this is simpler because we have to add upgrade after init join. And then kubetest run E2E.
But I believe the current tests actually run tests, then upgrade, then test, so that you know that the cluster was working before you upgraded.
No, you are right, but those tests does not work. So
that's right. But do we?
So as a short-term solution, I think that we can test only one time after the upgrades. Okay, then we can iterate on this, because kind can be using action, you can combine action together, you can manage workflow, but I don't think that this responsibility should be on kind. It should be on kubetest. I commented on the document about kubetest 2 along this way. If we can think to an interface to set up the alter steps of the cluster.
Yeah, so
I think this is the right place. This is my opinion for this.
So I think we can I think we can do that to the index test function, and we'll write out a fax to a certain directory. So what we can do is use the usual scheduling to build and up a cluster and things, and then the first step of test is run the alter, and we can have a special like kind upgrade test type in the kind kubetest 2.
Yes, but really, if we want to achieve this for this cycle, we have to give us a small ambition. So make it simple and make it work.
Right.
And this will be a huge improvement.
What is the time frame for trying to get these tests up?
So first of all, like we discussed that we should, that was my promise to Tim and to the group, that we should start with upgrades and X on Y tests early next cycle. So the planning we are doing here is basically we are deciding how to proceed for the next cycle, because that's when I wanted to start the work for this.
When you say next cycle, do you have, can we be clear there's like a date on that? That's like beginning of
like the end of March, when this cycle ends. I wanted to start planning how to do the upgrade scenarios, and the upgrades are already doable with the current version of Kind, because you can execute Docker commands, and you can copy the binaries to the node you want to upgrade. But it's more of a question like, should we keep the Kind deployer to what it's supposed to be, only up, down, test setup, and build, or should we extend it? To my opinion, we shouldn't extend it, and we should rely instead of the test CMD. I mean, if kubetest 2 is going to support this, so with the test CMD extension, we can tell the Kind cluster to not provision Kubernetes cluster, to not provision Kubernetes cluster, and then we can we can provision one as well, but we can then execute some sort of a command, which could be external to Kind, and to basically modify the nodes in such a way that you can perform upgrade. And like Fabrizio is saying, we can test only the resulted cluster because we already have signal for the original.
So I have a suggestion for that then. What if we break it up like this? So to be clear, I'm working on kubetest 2 now. It's at the point where I should be able to start writing an actual tester and a deployer for Kind like today. I am extremely interested in being able to develop Kind CI signal without depending on all of the legacy we have going on in every other E2E job. The simplest and first tester we're going to add is one that just you run a command. Like that is the args. All of the args to the tester are just some command that you're running in its args. So if we implement that and we implement a Kind deployer that does build up, etc., which should be pretty quick to borrow from the existing one in old kubetest, because they have fairly similar, if more clarified interfaces, we can have kubetest 2 do build, provision, etc., run a command. That command can even just be a shell script in Kind somewhere temporarily to do the steps of the upgrade test. Actual upgrading, what if we make that something like Kind alpha upgrades?
I mean, there are multiple ways of solving this. The big question was, should we even add this functionality to Kind? The alternative, of course, is to maintain this separate tool, like in the kubeadm repo. it should be a simple command that we can wrap all the upgrade logic.
That's true. I mean, so if you basically treat the Docker exec as an SSH, you can write something that looks like what you would run on any cluster to hit all the nodes and tell them to like curl a binary for kubeatum and from a release and do that. On the other hand, I'm starting to buy into more Timothy St. Clair's argument that like other testing besides the kubeatum project may want to see like what happens to my workload as I upgrade the cluster, and that might not be entirely unreasonable to test. That said, if we're going to rush this and iterate it and things, we probably don't want to advertise it as being on the same degree of stable. But kubeatum has precedence for this itself in doing an alpha subcommand.
I think that there is an important point that we have to keep in mind, that today kind, after completing the create sequence, forgets the tuple is not capable to restart any sequence, because it basically it is not able to discover the configuration again.
But so that's something we can fix, and I think that sort of thing, it would be best to keep that within kind instead of trying to externalize it. So it might actually be better to make upgrade be like subcommand so that we can still kind of keep some of those details internal for now.
If you want, I'm working on Kinder, which is for the developer experience, and for Kinder, and basically it is a library built on top of Kind. So I'm not forking, and this is intentional. And I already have the discovery part, so rebuild the config starting from the node that actually exists. And then I have action. If you want, I can show you how it works. And this is necessary if you use kind, if you think to invoke kind on an existing cluster. I'm happy to share this, and if this will go back in the main kind, I'm only then happy to help in making this happen.
Okay, yeah, so I'm on board with either route. I think we can have a kinder binary and execute it, but I think actually maybe what we might want to do is have not even necessarily a binary, a script for now that is, and maybe it's not kinder, but it's the thing that does the upgrade test logic for now, and possibly the upgrade itself can go in, but I'm also okay with it being outside if like that's easier to iterate on quicker. I mean, you're totally unblocked from me to just build that and get it ready to go, and we could always bring it back in later. Whatever route.
So what we can do now is start adding this into the alpha of kind, like an alpha subcommand of kind, and eventually we can bring it to a GA functionality in kind if you want, or if you think that this is completely going out of scope, we can then break it apart and move it to the kubeadm repo again.
I felt it was. I think now it's more of like it's a thing that's certainly in scope for what kind as a tool should do. I don't know if it's in scope for what it should be trying to do well today. Maybe like after we've stabilized what even does kind cluster up do, right? That is changing over time. For example, we just added like configuring the proxy details. I think some of that's going to continue to change, but we can, if we explicitly call it alpha, I don't really see a problem there. And I do think that like someday this upgrade scenario is going to be pretty mature as well, since we're going to be using it for testing, and also since we are not using Kubernetes anywhere for testing. And in that respect, I want to bring it up to being both should be maintained at like the same like degree, and will probably be useful to others.
So one problem that remains with all the scenarios we are talking about here is that we still have to enable a configurable way for the current version of kind to support the scenario where it's not bringing up the cluster. So it only provisions the nodes.
Do we need to for upgrade? It
Uh,
seems like we can bring up a cluster as it is today and then do upgrade.
so for upgrades, not really. But I was thinking that we still need it.
No, we need it for the developer experience. This is a precondition for getting started with kind.
Right. So I do think that this is a thing we should do, but I think that's not exactly the same problem.
No,
Yes.
it doesn't fit with updates, but this is necessary to unblock another thread because people are having difficulties to test latest change in kubeadmin because they need multiple nodes and so on. So
right. Okay. Well, I mean, so let's also do that, but separate thing, and that one is definitely like in kind. That needs to be a first class thing.
But sorry, going back to upgrade, I'm a little bit. We talked about many options. I don't understand if there is already a decision how to go on.
I want to leave it to you two to decide if you'd rather move to an entry alpha command or continue iterating out of tree for now. I think both of those are reasonable in the immediate term.
So the alpha pattern has worked very well for us in kubeadm, so I think we should try this in kind. You can, like I said earlier, at any point in time, you can decide to kick this out from the project, and or bring this into the main functionality. So this is what we can do.
Okay.
I guess the only strange thing will be short term that we'll be calling this alpha while the rest of kind is also alpha, but.
In kubeadm we have alphas, betas. I mean, yeah.
We need like zeta or something, and we wrapped back around, and it's before
experimental.
Experimental is also fine. So I just remembered that we also have the X on Y tests. For those, we are going to need the scenario where you don't start the cluster, because the X on Y tests, they work in such a way that the kubeadm binary is newer than the control plane.
So for that, we actually just need the nodes to have different. We need to decouple the config, and we need to allow nodes to have different images.
So basically, with the current version of kind, if we deploy all the binaries to the node and just stop without starting the cluster, we can then build only the new kubeadm binary and copy it inside and start with that.
We can. It's going to probably be more stable if we can get to a point where you can just get an image for each version and just say in the config, okay, these nodes are this version and this node is that version.
No, X on Y means that I start from version X and I land to version Y. I'm not changing the node. It's just a normal upgrade.
No, it's not.
The ones that we had, it's like mass, like control planes at one version and nodes are at another.
No. Sorry. So this test is not doing that. It's basically testing the skew of kubeadm against the control plane.
Okay. We couldn't. We could.
So this test
is kind doesn't have a good concept for that.
Yes, we just have to stop. We just have to stop and create a new kind binary. But I think that we should not build a separate node image. I think this is overkill.
Not for this. I thought we were talking about like skew testing of the rest of the cluster.
There are no skew testing now.
Right.
I mean, eventually we are going to have skew tests as well. Where one of the nodes is on an old version of Kubernetes. So we have to think about this. But so early next cycle, I want to start actually with these X on Y tests. So
okay. Well, let's add something along the lines of what Fabrizio already has a PR out for to let you provision a cluster without the nodes booted.
But I think that it will be great if we arrange a short demo or or a code audit on what I have already prototyped.
Okay.
That will give great feedback to me. Maybe the next week if we are not in an hurry.
Definitely. So I'd like to try to squeeze in one last thing. The IPv6 work looks really cool and like something we want to test, especially considering that Kubernetes has no CI for this currently. We found that Weave is not going to work because IPv6. I'd like to ask what people think about switching to Calico.
So I'm okay with Calico. One big problem I've seen with Calico is that it has weird, like a weird bug with seeders, basically, where if you don't provide enough, number of possible IPs, it's going to break. But we can definitely switch now and give this a test. Also, Calico is going to support ARM. Because we just saw it supports ARM, it supports IPv6, so it supports everything that we want. At the same time, what I wanted to say about Calico here. So the IPv6 PR, I think it needs some work, definitely. And also, we don't have signal in general. I have no idea if IPv6 works.
I understand it. It's been a periodic thing that it most works-ish, but it's because it doesn't have signal, it breaks. I also know that there is an effort that just span up to do dual stack.
I had a not so good experience in the past with Calico testing on HA because at least some release ago, because Calico is installing a TCD on the master node, the default manifest, and when you scale up the master node, it creates another TCD.
Right. So I think we should explore it with they have an option to use Kubernetes as the store.
Yes. You have the default manifest does not work, but you have to change it. There is a way to make it work with HA. So
I think
it definitely works. It does not work out of the box.
I think that's okay since we control the default manifest. We can make changes like that as necessary.
We're going to have to bundle it anyway because we want to support air-gapped.
Right. Yeah, so that's the main thing, because if we're not trying to support that sort of thing, I mean, today you can do something once we document ways to load images without load the mount thing or building a custom node image. Then the only other thing you need to mount is the manifest and just overwrite it. And we already support swapping in a different. Technically, it is already possible to use a different overlay today, but we want to pick the right one for what we ship out of the box, what works air-gapped without any real effort, and what we're going to use for most of the CI.
So there's no right choice. The most popular one is Flannel, but I've seen many mistakes in their release process. My personal favorite is Weave, but if Weave does not support IPv6, we are left with Calico.
Yeah, so I've been fairly happy with myself. That said, I haven't explored many of them, so I wanted to ask around. I think given that IPv6 seems like a high value thing going forward, we should give this a shot, especially now that they're actually supporting ARM. That was one of the biggest reasons that I selected Weave initially, was that they had painless support for multiple architectures out of the box, including multi-architecture clusters, if that's your thing, which we don't actually need for Kind, but that shows you how painless it is.
Yes, we like most of them support. Most of the popular ones already support multi-arch.
Right, but not too long ago when I looked, some of them, like I think Flannel and Calico, were basically just AMD64.
Yes, pretty much last year.
And I know I see Hippie and I saw Devin, they have some work coming out to actually get ARM CI out soon. So what I'm trying to find is if we can find a way to do ARM and IPv6 without them running into each other. If we could find an overlay that works well for both, that is ideal.
Let's try Calico.
Okay. I will probably move forward with that then, unless someone else wants to PR it first. It might be a little bit easier since we probably need to push images and things. Cool. Lumir and Fabrizio, let's follow up some more about upgrades and clusters that haven't provisioned Kubernetes yet and that sort of thing. And I will look at your existing PRs again today.
Thank you.
I'd also like to send your way a V1 Alpha 3, just minimal one, and I think that will make it easier to also add these kinds of fields to the config.
Yeah. I would like to help in this, but it is really difficult when you change the API to make things in parallel. So I don't think that it is feasible. But let's start. I will follow up if there are something left.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Happy Monday.